journey of suffering and loss. And this is one of my favorite ever things to do, Debbie, in the whole world. So just thank you guys so much. So today I had the pleasure of writing for this sweet little man here. This family, you guys, is in our church. I can't tell you all the things they've done. It's incredible. It's overwhelming, and they have how many kids? 9 kids. Sawyer's not the youngest, but they have been through so much with Sawyer, and I'm just I stand in amazement of how they have handled this and how they have come through it. And so I'm going to let whoever parent wants to share a little bit about Sawyer's story. Y'all, this story just blows my mind. I was reading it last night. I didn't realize, I'm gonna let you tell that part though, I didn't realize some of the way that Sawyer received blood. He's a blood recipient, and it just blew my mind. So I'm gonna let Heather or Josh, whichever one. This is Heather and Josh Rucker. This is Sawyer.
You're always going to get me in the mouth. But Sawyer was diagnosed with infantile acute lymphoblastic leukemia when he was 7 months old. So a life of cancer and hospitals is all he's ever known. And on the day he was diagnosed, since many of you have lived so much in the medical world and the blood world and numbers and blood counts and things like this, Sawyer's white count, which normal is 10,000, Sawyer's white blood count was 570,000, and his hemoglobin, which you want to be around 13, they would give you a blood transfusion if your hemoglobin drops typically below 8 is usually the standard. Sawyer's hemoglobin was 2. His blood was 98% blood. His blood was 98% leukemia. And we have pictures of it. His blood was literally white. And they told us they did not expect him to live throughout the day. And that step one, the only thing they could do to desperately, drastically try to save his life was replace his entire blood volume. So he was intubated. He was intubated, and they had a team. He had one line, a femoral line in his femoral vein, and another line, I think I remember it being in a peripheral vein, and one team of doctors. It's called apheresis, and there is such a thing called a apheresis machine that would do a blood exchange, but he was too little and too fragile to do that machine, so they had to do it by hand. And so with the 2 different lines in him, one team of doctors was pulling out with the 30 cc syringes, was pulling off the infected blood, while at the same rate from the other line, another doctor was pushing in healthier blood. And so they did this. The room was crowded full of doctors because no one had ever seen this procedure done by hand. And so their hands would cramp these big, huge syringes, so they would tap out and the next doctor would come in. And so they did this for 5 hours and replaced his entire blood volume twice through the night. And as we stood and prayed over him and just watched in shock and horror, we could see him. He was the color, you couldn't see where his diaper ended and his skin began. He was as white as a sheet of paper. And we could start to see his ears turn pink as the healthy blood was entering his body. And so he survived that day, glory to God. And the next day began chemotherapy, and he had a 3.5 year of chemotherapy. So he lived most of his life in the hospital. That's where I met Deborah and her beautiful daughter, Jessie. We met in the childhood cancer world. But the one other time that blood was, Sawyer has received more blood transfusions than I can count. More than 20 at least. But one other instance was when he was in desperate need of platelets. So he had to be hospitalized, and we went to transfuse, and there were none available. Because He needed hero blood. Our whole family is O negative. So Sawyer was O negative, CMV negative. And there was no hero blood, no hero platelets. And so we waited, knowing that his life hung in the balance, that there was no blood. Because you take that for granted. You know, in a normal life, a blood transfusion is a really big deal. If you need a blood transfusion, that is pretty major. In the cancer world, it's another blood transfusion. We take it for granted. Yeah, oh, we're just getting blood and platelets today, and then we're going to go home. It just becomes part of your world. It was the first time that this life-saving gift was unavailable. And they finally found some and flew it in. And so he was able to receive, maybe they were yours. They flew that in for him and saved his life again. So we are so very grateful. Because we're a member of Tyler Christian Fellowship, so Joe and Becky have shared their story, and their sons have shared their story, and we've known Josh and have been very keyed into organ donation and the circle of life, and so we've been spectators, and obviously we've been through a lot with Sawyer being sick, but we never considered him being honored as being a part, because we didn't know, we thought it was only the major, organs is what we think of blood as being small potatoes, but it saved his life so many times, and we're so grateful. So grateful.